All right, welcome everybody. Tonight is June 13th, 2022. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. We have the entire committee and actually the entire board here tonight, along with distinguished members of the administration. We have two presentations tonight. You need to introduce anything? All right, so first up, let's have Utica come up, and whenever you're ready.
Good evening. It's nice to see everyone again. I haven't seen you all in a couple months, so it's nice to see you, and it's exciting that we're all nearing summer vacation. If you haven't met me before, I'm Lisa Watkins. I'm Utica National's Director of Property Claims. Just going to give you guys a recap of some major payments that have gone out directly to the vendors and some advances that have been made. But just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce a couple other folks that have joined us tonight. We have Brian Seville, who's our Senior Vice President and Director of Utica National's Education Institution, right over there. And we also have Reed Sadner, who's with Willis, who I think several of you talk to frequently. So we have some support there, and of course Patrick Young, who I know a lot of you speak to on probably a daily basis, who's our independent adjuster on this claim. Okay, if you want to advance the slide. So there is a couple of payments that are not on here because we just issued them on Thursday or Friday, and this was printed right before we issued the additional payments, so I can fill you in on what those numbers are. But what you'll see on the slide here is this is all of the direct payments that have been made to vendors on the high school. And we did make an additional payment to Procom Roofing of $139,553.11 on June 9th. So that brings our grand total for this slide to $4,758,222.31. And this just keeps the process going much quicker if we can issue direct payments to the vendors, so happy we can do that. On the next slide, you'll see updates for the elementary school. And to date, we have issued direct payments. We did an additional payment on this one as well to Procom Roofing on June 9th for $138,821, which gives us a grand total of $1,983,000. Or $983.28.84. And we have some advances that have been made as well on the next slide. So you'll see, in addition to the $3,250,000 payment, we issued another $1 million on June 9th. So that brings total advance payments today of $4,253,000. And we do anticipate making more payments over the summer. We know there's going to be a lot of work going on, so I know that Patrick will keep us very well informed so that we can continue to authorize those and make sure that you have that money in hand for when you really need it. Does anybody have any questions, any specifics on?
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from the committee or the rest of the board? Art?
I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know some of our homeowners in Upper Dublin are struggling with insurance claims, and I know other businesses can struggle with dealing with insurance, and it's just been, speaking for the entire board, thank you, and you've made a terrible situation at least a little bit easier for us to move forward and improve all the conditions, you know, and it's really been a pleasure working with you guys and looking to continue, you know, the relationship.
Anybody else? All right, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
Next up, we have ICS and CMTA. I'm not sure who wants to kick that off. Michael?
Thank you all for having us. So this is the Upper Dublin School District Disaster Recovery Update. I'm Michael Logan with CMTA, and then with us is Phil Solomon with ICS, Bill Slaughter also with ICS, and then Adam Pierce, who's with CMTA. Next slide, please. So the agenda we'd like to cover today are the actions since the last board update this past month, starting with the high school and exterior into the Fort Washington Elementary School storm damage update, and then on to the GISA project update, followed by next steps, and then we'll open it up for questions. And with that, I'll open it up to Bill Slaughter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us again. Just wanted to update you as to our progress that we're making on Fort Washington Elementary School and the high school. Currently at the high school, inside and on the exterior, we've been completing the testing and balancing on the 9 HVAC units that we've replaced over the Easter break. We've been following some restoration work that still needs to take place in the high school, cove base replacement. There's a kitchen and family consumer science that needs to be done. And there's also a few doors that sustained some damage. And we're working with the custodial services to schedule that so that we don't interfere with any of the summer cleaning that usually takes place. So we're working with the building staff and Mr. Lester on that. The high school roofing material has been released. The insulation is on site. We've been storing it at the township parking lot across the street. And the rest of the materials, not in full, but there is a large delivery of materials coming later this week for the natatorium roof and some of the other roof areas. We have begun on some of the roof coating on the areas that do not have to be torn out. Those areas needed to be brushed and applied with a coating and a scrim in order to reestablish the warranty on the roof. So a lot of that work is taking place right now. We're still putting primer on. Once the primer's done, then we'll move to the scrim and the flood coat, pardon me. The Field of Dreams batting cage was completed. And there's some interior building work, work that needs to be done at the Field of Dreams field house, some drywall work and some lighting. So we're getting the final prices in on that so that Utica can review and approve that. Our fencing contractors have been making out pretty well along Spark Drive and some of the perimeter fence along the Axe community. The track and stadium work, we wanted to wait till after graduation, and we'll jump right on that right away so that when summer practice starts for track and field and some of the other events, we'll be out of the way and working in the perimeter areas where we won't disturb any of that. Most of the miscellaneous equipment that has been ordered has been received with a few exceptions. I think the only thing we don't have right now is the field hockey goals, and we should be getting them shortly, but all that material's here on site. We're working with some of the contractors to get some of that stuff assembled. We met with the AD, got an order of priority that he needs to get that material for him, and that's the assembly order that we're going to follow to make sure he has everything for fall sports, and then spring sports can follow up with that. Next slide, please. The stadium and tennis court lighting has been solidified, and we issued the purchase order from the school district. That came out last week. The tennis courts repair, repaving, and signage proposals have been submitted to the insurance company, and we just spoke about that before the meeting. We're going to get together in the next couple days for those approvals as well and get that ordered. So we're expecting the stadium and tennis court lights to be delivered late July and have the installation done by the end of August. Pardon me. The high school site drawings are completed. We've just inserted the electrical drawings. We have one more sheet, structural drawing for the netting backstop. That'll be submitted to the township by the end of this week. And that'll generate the permit for all the work except for the fence, which we already have a permit for. The ball control netting, which is going to be the tall 30-foot structures, the sleeves have been installed, and we're expecting the poles in late July as well. That's been released as in addition. The gym floor damage, the repair's been approved. We met with the contractor. That work is going to proceed forward, and that will close the gym for most of the summer. While we do have to replace some of the floor under the one bleacher where it comes out into the edge of the field of play, everyone felt it was best to resand and refinish the entire floor. So that'll be a full sand all the way down to the wood, relined and refinished in addition. Next slide, please. Twine Construction Company has been selected as the general contractor for the claim area. Materials are currently being submitted for approval. We've already started some of the wall framing in those areas, as well as remainder of the demolition and some of the floor patch. So he's moving forward on that. And of course, in front of you tonight for approval is their contract. So they've been working, based on a verbal agreement. They've been cooperative with that. They've been, again, mobilized and started. I touched on that earlier. And the 15 portable classrooms have been secured with Mobilease. Mr. Leckman was kind enough to get that purchase order going, and they will be installed and ready for use when the kids return in the fall. As soon as school's out, they're going to start dismantling at the middle school and moving them over to us. So again, this is just a reminder of where we're at with the Fort Washington interior area. The light tan or orange area is the area we're currently working in. The green area will be phase 2, and the blue area, should you select to go forward with the Geese area, would be the parity areas. We're calling that phase 3. I'll turn it back over to Michael. Thank you.
And so a review of how we got here today for the GISA project. In late March 2022, CMTA was selected as the Upper Dublin ESCO partner, and then we immediately went into the project design development phase. So we got on site, did investigations, utility analysis, and through several meetings with Mr. Leckman and Mr. Lester, proceeded with selecting some initial scope to proceed into the design process. Through that process, we pulled together mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, architectural designs, fully engineered design drawing sets, which were all included in bid documents to be sent out to vendors and subcontractors for a competitive bid process. Since that point, we've received those bids, and this month we've been analyzing those bids and reviewing those with their associated scopes and costs to see what makes sense in a project for this school. We developed an investment grade audit report, and through meetings with Mr. Leckman, Mr. Lester, we have come up with a project scope recommendation that we're excited to present to the board tonight. Next slide, please. So going back to January of 2022, the initial cost estimate for this scope for the GISA project was about $10.3 million. Since that point in the design development phase, there have been some major additions to the scope of work in the form of kitchen upgrades and ADA upgrades, lighting controls, which bring the project the cost estimate up to about $10.8 million. But that also includes, several other additions to the scope not listed. Also through the development, it was determined that there was some HVAC scope that was initially in the storm damaged recovery scope that was actually absorbed by the GISA scope. So that left open or made available some potential funds that could be shifted at the decision of Upper Dublin School District to the GISA project, if you wish, and that's to the tune of about $650,000. So if you add that to the revised cost estimate, that brings it to about $11.4 million, and the project option we have to present to you tonight is about $12.1 million, but it also includes several other add alternates, which are shown on the following slide. So next slide, please. So this table shows all the different scope descriptions that were discussed between CMTA, ICS, and Upper Dublin School District. And so these are, you show the description, the approximate line item value that's associated with that scope. And then through our meetings with Mr. Leckman and Mr. Lester, we have shown whether the scope is selected for this $12.1 million project. So this renovation includes a comprehensive geothermal HVAC system, along with a sprinkler installation for the entirety of the facility. HVAC upgrades, so this would replace your existing pneumatic controls with new DDC controls and integrated to the existing Upper Dublin School District front end for facilities to access it offline. It also includes LED lighting upgrades and lighting controls, and then parity measures, the cabinetry, casework, floor ceilings, all of those things to match the storm-damaged area to make the full school look like one new refreshed school at the end of the completion of this project. So with all that scope selected, you can see in the right-hand column that brings the total cost to about $12.09 million. Next slide, please. So this shows the design and development schedule, and I realize the text is a little bit small here, but this is all to say that it's been a tight timeline for pulling all this together, and there have been several milestones that we've been working hard to meet, and I'm happy to say up to this point through each step, we've been meeting those milestones to get to today for this financial committee meeting. While we're going through this, we're developing the contract, hopefully in a timely manner so that we can continue to meet those milestones as we move forward at the discretion of the board here. So next slide, please. And a big reason that we're pulling together, why there's such time emphasis on this pulling together the contract and going through, is the order equipment deadline. So we have some known price increases at the end of this month that we know it's to really greater than $75,000 of equipment is not ordered prior to July 1st. And cost is not the only consideration here for getting this underway. Current lead times are shown for the equipment in about 12 to 24 weeks. So we want to get in front of ordering that equipment as fast as possible so that there are no schedule delays in getting the students back into the building. But the construction schedule, like Bill has said, has not changed. It's the targeting the storm damaged area first to get everything ready by the end of this year. And then into the code upgrade area, followed by the parity area. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps go for the GISA project, we're currently finalizing the contract that will be submitted for the Upper Dublin School District board review. And then pending your all's decision with proceeding with the project, the next step for this committee would be to recommend to proceed with the GISA project next week at the legislative board meeting. And then CMTA, upon that approval, is prepared to order that equipment as fast as possible so that we're getting in front of those cost increases and potential schedule delays with lead times. And we're also prepared to notify the successful contractors and really get the construction preparation going as quick as possible. Then I'll leave it to Bill.
And then next steps on the claim side is, like the contract that's before you tonight for Twining Construction. There's lots of other contractors that are doing work currently that we're going to be generating contracts for that will be brought before you for approval. That's not to say that the contractors aren't working. They're contractors that we've worked with in the past, and materials have been ordered. So we'll get those contracts to you as quickly as possible. And then, our other goal is to finalize 2 sets of drawings. One, the set of roof drawings for the high school, and 2, the exterior claim work at the high school. There's still some open permits for that. So once we have those drawings finalized, the exterior stuff should be done by the end of this week and submitted to the township. The roofing sets were 90%. We sent our comments back today. We expect the 100% drawings ready for the township within probably 2 to 3 weeks. So that's not holding up any of the roof work, but we need to get that into them so they can be aware of those situations. Most of what we're doing right now is just prep work as far as the roof goes. So are there any questions on either the claim or the GISA for us?
Any questions for Jenna?
So looks like we're going with the geothermal option. So all the testing, I assume, went well. We feel confident with that as a solution.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Another question on that same slide. I'm on slide 9, sorry. The E3, there's E3A and E3B. Do we have a decision to make there at this point, or is that's a down the road decision?
Yes, so we've presented the cost and savings associated with the solar options. The solar arrays, 2 options were considered. One was for the array on the new roof over the claim area, and then the second option was that same array, but with some upgraded infrastructure to allow expanding that array. But it was determined that with the cost of that measure and the potential savings that we were seeing from the installation with the solar production, that the cost wouldn't, or the savings wouldn't actually outweigh the cost. So at Mr. Leckman, Mr. Lester's decision, it was not included in this scope.
And then one other question, back up on slide 8. You were talking about there's $300,000 for HVAC scope that was shifted or could be shifted, it sounds like. Again, do we have a decision to make there on that $300,000 and $350,000, or what? Yep.
And my friends at Utica, feel free to jump in here, but so there's not really a decision to make there. What's going to happen here, and Patrick, feel free to add on. So these are areas where, as part of the claim, Utica owes us to replace like for like. If we're pulling things out, so if we're upgrading our HVAC systems in the building, then when we reconcile out the project at the end of the claim, that's where we would get funds back from Utica to potentially help us fund this project in like for like. So there's not really a decision to make there. That's just part of when they did their work around developing this project, they said, we don't need some of the like-for-like in the building that exists. We need this new stuff, for lack of better words. So Patrick, feel free to clarify anything I might have misspoke on there.
No, I think that was accurate. So we've evaluated through our building consultants the cost of which is in place presently. And as a courtesy to the district, we're allowing that application across the new system for the same valuation, and the district essentially would kick in the additional cost, or we will still fund the like-for-like cost into whatever project you feel necessary for the upgraded system that's more energy efficient.
Michael, just to follow up on the question about the solar, if we are choosing not to do this at this point, this doesn't preclude doing it in the future.
No, absolutely not. It's, the designs have already been created and the bid data has been, presented to the district, so that option still remains for future consideration.
All right. I have a question about the equipment order. What is included in that? Is that for the whole phase? I mean, or to what extent can we see more orders coming later? Because my assumption is you can't order it all at this point just because of the nature of the project.
So we are including the order of all of the classroom units up front, because that is where the primary cost increase is coming into play. So those are water source heat pumps that will go into each of the individual classrooms. So that would be the first group to be ordered, and then also we're looking into ordering the pumps for the same reason. The cost increase isn't as substantial, but we are wanting to get ahead of that cost increase from a delayed proposal, as well as any lead times associated.
So the equipment for phase 2 and 3, that's not included in this order. Is that correct?
It would be included in this
Oh, would
order.
be.
Yes, so all of the equipment would be included, and then we're working with the district to come up with areas to store that equipment upon receiving it. And again, this is all from both the cost side of things as well as the lead time. We want to make sure we're getting all the equipment as fast as possible so that there are no delays when the subcontractors are able to install it.
No, and that makes sense. I mean, I think that's worked well for us at Sandy Run as well, as long as we have place to store it and stuff like that. My other question is maybe more one for Mr. Lester. The gymnasium floor or the gym being unavailable for the summer, who is being impacted by that, and are there alternative or other solutions for that?
Our high school programs are not affected. Some of the outside users that we would have, UDJ, could be possibly affected. We're looking at alternate locations from Maple Glen Elementary. We'll still have use of the aux gym here as well.
I guess it's too early to look at Sandy Run for that, right?
Yes, yeah, we're not ready to allow the outside groups in the Sandy Run.
Figured. Thanks.
Anyone else? Jeff?
Michael, quick question on the schedule. We've been talking about the storm area, the code area, and the parity area. And now I see on the schedule phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Are they equivalents? I mean, is 1 storm, 2 code, and 3
Yes, sir.
parity?
Yes, phase 1 would be the storm, phase Okay, test. Perfect. Phase 1 would be the storm damaged area, phase 2, the code area, and phase 3 would be the parity area.
And the idea is that they run sequentially. Phase 1's done, then we move to 2, and then move to 3?
Correct. So phase 1 would be completed in the storm damaged area. Students would be shifted from phase 2 to phase 1, and then so that we could complete the full project sequentially, like you said.
Other, Michael?
There we go.
Question about the gym floor. I know there was, it took a look at replacing the floor with the complete floor or partial. Was the decision to replace the complete floor based more on aesthetics, or was there structural concerns about only a partial replacement?
All right. So the physical wood replacement is still in the area of damage, which is under the one main bleacher. The decision to refinish the entire floor was made because when the bleacher is in its collapsed position, part of the new wood would be exposed to the gym area. And typically, that material for finish tends to yellow over age. So we would have a much more yellow in the floor that wasn't replaced than we would in the area where we replaced the floor. So you'd kind of have a yellow and a white kind of area. So we felt it best, and the insurance company agreed that we sand and refinish the entire floor, but the floor replacement is only about 900 square feet.
Thank you.
Bill, it's later in the agenda, but in the contract for that, there was something about cupping of the floor too, or is there?
Yeah, so when gym floors get wet, they tend to cup. So the original area that was removed, of course, was cupped obviously at the start. Then as time progressed, the areas outside of that, about another 18 to 24 inches, started to cup slightly. Typically, you try and sand that out. The problem is sometimes when you sand that out, it reverse cups the opposite direction. So instead of being concave, it goes convex. And so we just decided it was best to remove that material all the way out to where the floor is still flat and not try and sand the cups out.
Art?
The summertime, the roof at the natatorium, were we planning to shut the pool down already so it won't impact any activity in the pool?
We let everyone know well in advance that we'd be shutting down for the summer. Yes, we do need to shut down the pool for the roof work. What we will be doing is installing the pool cover over top the roof so that any roof work, we don't have to worry about items falling into it. They would fall on the cover. It can be recovered off that. So that way there's no draining, cleaning, and refilling the pool, time delays, reheating. So the pool will still be maintained just underneath the cover.
Okay.
The roofing contractor is aware of the schedule for the pool activities. Our goal is to make sure that we are enclosed so that swimming can resume, and then we will finish the exterior work, while the pool's in use. So we're focusing on what would keep the pool from opening, getting that closed in first, so that mid-August timeline can be met.
Right. With Fort Washington, Phase 3 is the front of the building. I'm wondering, will the front of the building be shut down? And how will we do the access to the remainder of the building?
So there will always be access to the building. So what we were going to do in Phase 3 in the during school activities was concentrate on kindergarten and first grade. They would be moved to what is now the code upgrade portion of the building.
Right.
And the students that were in the code upgrade portion will remain in the portable classrooms so that we can do that. So really all we're going to do is take that hallway from the main office, carve it out with a temporary partition, and work in that area down there. The summertime is when we would do the common areas like the cafeteria, the gym, the office spaces, the main corridor, those areas there.
What are you looking to do in the gym and the cafeteria?
So the gym's going to be a sand and refinish on the wood floors, sand and refinish on the doors and frames, and a replacement of the ceiling.
Right.
The cafeteria is going to be sand and refinish any of the woodwork that's in that serving line, faculty dining area there, and replacement of the ceiling. But the floor is fairly new, so we're just going to protect and leave the floor in place.
Okay. With the geothermal, I know at the high school, this is probably newer technology, but when we did geothermal at the high school, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, we have separate units for each classroom cost of the geothermal?
Yes, it would be a separate unit for each classroom, each area of the building. Same with there'd be several units inside the cafeteria.
That would be the same thing at Fort Washington?
Yes, it would be, difference would be the location. These units would be inside the rooms.
So we'd have to close off,
It would be taking place at one of the blank window panels.
right, okay.
So if you think about the new windows at Fort Washington, in the middle of each room, there's already blank space.
I think we had a picture of that last
Yes.
month. Okay. You said additional contracts. You mentioned there would be additional contracts with additional individuals. Is that additional costs?
No, those costs are already settled with the insurance company. The reason why we're issuing the contract is it's a direct pay. So even though Utica is paying for the contract, there needs to be a contract between the owner and the contractor.
Right.
So if you want to think of it this way, it's like a multiple prime contract job, but we have much more than 3 or 4 contractors. So there's a contract with, let's say, Musco for the lights. There's a contract with BSI to install the lights. There's a contract with Great Valley to install the fence, Jones Turf to perform. So we're not rolling it all up under one contractor. We're actually getting individual prices for the different types of work. And as the owner's rep, we're basically acting like the general contractor construction manager.
And Bill, can I jump in there just to make sure it's clear? So we're not talking about additional contracts for the $12.1 million Giza project. The additional contractors would be for the claim area of the project.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be all the contracts there, would be for anything that was storm damage related.
Okay.
And for the Giza part, there would be one contract with CMTA, and then you guys hold the subcontracts under that, is that right?
Correct, sir. Mike?
So the last question I had was.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike.
Are we having any concerns about material availability? And if so, what are we doing to mitigate that, especially for the summertime work?
So a lot of the summertime work is just preparatory work for when we are to receive equipment based on the lead times for the larger piece of equipment. And there are, we're always on the lookout for those material lead time concerns. And so we'll just be addressing those as they arise.
Anything on the critical path that you have see as a significant risk that we should be aware of?
At this point, I don't have anything. Bill, do you have anything to add?
So as part of the selection process, we took that into account, and one of the reasons why we selected the general contractor that we did is that they have an in-house mill workshop, and cabinets right now have been running very long lead times. They were also able to procure library furniture from a vendor that we're not very familiar with in this area, and they've able to promise us delivery times that were pretty significant. So that was a premeditated move on everyone's part here.
And we're actively engaged in the make-buy decisions.
Sorry?
And we're actively engaged in the make-buy decisions, what commodities are getting purchased versus what's getting made in-house with the
Correct.
contractor.
Correct.
Very good, thank you.
I want to go back to that 300,000 and the 350,000. My math isn't very good. So those two numbers, actually, we pay, but then it gets subtracted at the end because it's part of the
So
storm?
those numbers we had asked for originally from the contractor that's performing the work at Fort Washington Elementary School. So they provided us pricing on that, and the insurance company approved those numbers for some HVAC work replacement that was damaged during the storm. Seeing as Twining Construction is a general contractor and utilizing a mechanical contractor to perform that work and mark that up, we decided to move that into the Giza project along with the funds that were associated with that, so that one mechanical contractor was on site completing all the work at the same time.
But that gets subtracted from the district cost.
So I want to be clear. What we're talking about recommending here is a $12.1 million project. So
Right.
there is potential,
Correct.
working with Utica, to recover some of that as part of the insurance claim.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, and then, did you want to bring up, I had a conversation with Mark earlier today. Did you want to bring that up now, or?
I was going to do it later, but we could do it now. Do you want to?
Well, what I'm struggling with is the total cost of the project. I look back in March, and I know we approved ICS for project management and also site services. So what I'm suggesting, Andy, is perhaps develop a spreadsheet or a chart that we can see all the costs together at one point, where we can have potential savings, where we don't, but just to see all the costs of everything. There was one statement I read that we're paying separately Michael Johnson, but I don't see the amount that we're paying for Michael in that ICS agreement. And it's fair, it's significant money. It's not just, it's not a couple $100,000. It's project management, 587, site services today, and then the site services for the remainder of time. So, I'm hoping that at one point we can see everything together.
I think what I was envisioning after Art and I had this discussion earlier today was maybe a monthly report on this project, as we've had monthly reports on Sandy Run that sort of show the project holistically. From the board's point of view, I mean, I certainly appreciate that there's an insurance company part and there's a district part that's managed through ICS and CMTA. And so those naturally are kind of separate, but from the board's point of view, it's kind of one project. And so we'd kind of like to see it as maybe, just a monthly summary of one project, but it can highlight what portion is ours and what portion is Utica's. But just so we can see all of this in one place. Because when we look later in the agenda tonight, there's of these, I don't know, it's 24 items on the agenda tonight. A whole bunch of them are related to these projects, but it's not sort of all in one spot.
Right, there's also the Twining construction for $1.1 million. And I'm wondering if we know how much of that is district or insurance. Just to see it all in one place would be helpful.
We can certainly figure out a way to report that, right? So in every item, though, that the board is approving, and I understand what you're asking, but I think we're trying to make it very clear when we're approving items that this item that you're approving is part of the insurance claim versus the Giza project is a whole project unto itself. And, Phil and Michael, keep me honest here, is I think all of the soft costs of the project are part of the $12.1 million, right, including the ICS fees.
Yeah, that's correct. So all that is all in, but I hear what you're saying. So I think what we'll do is, moving forward, we'll just have one reconciliation for the project, and then we'll divide it up into claim covered, and then, Giza project, or however we want to categorize that. That way really what you're approving out of maybe district funds. I think that's kind of, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, so back in March when we approved the ICS, the project management, the sites, is that
That
those
is
amounts are in?
inclusive of the Michael Johnson all soft costs. So that approval had us managing any subcontractor in terms of professional service.
Right, but
So-
it's above,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's above the 12 million.
Yeah, so that's on the claim side still. So remember, we were approved on the claim side only. And then on the Giza side, that's CMTA. Now, we'll reconcile it all with you. No problem. I understand what you're getting at. But for the claim side, yes, all of that's inclusive in our agreement. So you should be getting reimbursement for that as well. So we'll put those spreadsheets together for you, and I'll work with Mr. Leckman to make it a little clearer. I know it's kind of muddy, because everything's been moving fast and everybody's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's like the
But,
trailer for the Giza project, like who's paying for that? Like something simple like that. It's being used.
And I assure you, behind the scenes, Utica is super good at tracking, and so are we. So I think maybe it's been a problem of clarifying that and rolling it up, but certainly understood, and we're happy.
It's just
to
a
do it.
reporting question.
Yeah.
It's just to make it clear for the board. Yeah.
Absolutely happy to do it as well. Yeah.
All right, anybody else for Jenna?
So on the topic of cost, so we haven't technically decided yet to do the parity measures, right? At what point do we need to make that decision? Because that's not an insignificant part of the 12 million. I mean, that's, a little more than 2.5 million of it, right?
Item A on the agenda is to work through that and make recommendations on, so right, we brought a recommendation to the board. Certainly, it's up to this committee to decide what they want to move forward to the full board.
The short answer to that question is next Monday night. I mean, really tonight, but officially next Monday night. Anyone else? For ICS, CMTA, anything on any presentation tonight? All right, thank you very much.
I'm not sure whose this is.
We'll move on to the regular business portion of our meeting, starting with announcements. Mr. Leckman?
I don't have any announcements.
All right, thank you. We do have minutes from our May meeting, May 10th. Members of the committee have had a chance to review those. Are we prepared to move that?
Yes.
Forward? Yes. Yes, okay, thank you. And we'll jump right into our reports and recommendations, starting with that Giza project recommendation as outlined by Michael just a few minutes ago for 12.1 million. Is there anything else to say?
The only thing I'll add is, again, if you go back to the presentation, again, Michael walked through it. Slide 9 has all of the details of the presentation, right? So to Ms. Evans' questions, parity measures are $2.46 million, and all of you can see the check marks highlight all of the add alternates that Mr. Lesser and I, Dr. Yanni was part of these conversations, determined was in our best interest to add into the project. So yes, some are very material, but our recommendation is the $12.1 million project, which includes all of the items that are checked on slide 9.
And just for full transparency, Darlene and Jeff and I also had an early version of this presentation where we did discuss in a little bit more detail which items were checked and which weren't and why. Obviously, we can have those conversations again if necessary.
When I think of buildings that did partial work and wouldn't do what we're calling the parity work, what winds up happening is you have to go back later and redo the work at increased costs. So we don't want one renovated hallway. So doing the parity work now will take a couple of those things off our facility condition assessment list, and Fort Washington will be in good shape at the end of the project.
Mike? Okay.
So on my topic of parity, so can you go over again what would be included in the parity portion of the project? I understand the concept, but, a little more nitty gritty? Sure, yeah.
Sure. I'll take it off. So included in the parity portion, that's really to make the rest of the facility consistent with the storm-damaged area. So this includes casework, cabinetry, new floors, new ceilings, painting where required. Let's see. Yeah, so lighting's also included. Sprinkler system throughout the facility, but that's included in the HVAC scope. Refinishing of the gym floor, new doors, ADA compliance upgrades with the new facilities. So several considerations to really make it look like one new facility.
Is there a new sound system or PA?
That's not included in
building?
this project.
No? Okay.
Talking about like a building-wide system, or you mean
Yeah,
like the one in the gym?
when they
and
make
cafeteria?
announcements or they
Yeah.
reach out to, not in the project.
Not in the GISA scope.
Okay.
No, sir.
Other questions? Andy?
Is there anything with regard to upgrading security in the building?
Not within the GISA scope at this point.
Not long ago, we did install the vestibule entrance and those kinds of things, made changes to the location and configuration of the front office along those lines. I don't know, it was 4 years ago, maybe, something like that. So those will just be, or have been restored after the tornado damage.
We also eliminated, Mark, some of the doors and some of the
That's right,
individual
exterior
classrooms.
classroom doors were eliminated. Yeah, so a number of security upgrades have already been made to this building.
For the parity part, does that also include anything on the exterior, especially on the front?
No exterior, including the front. There are exterior lights, like wall-mounted lighting that's included in the lighting scope, but no parity, not in the parity scope.
I was going to say, but some of that is part of the code. I'm sorry, just part of the regular claim, because the front was damaged, so all that obviously is going to be replaced. But that's under the claim side, so that's not in the GISA scope.
But what is replaced is really literally the replacement of what currently, or that overpass or that underpass?
That's all going to be replaced complete, right? Not piecemeal?
Right now, there's a structural analysis being done on some of the support structure for that. Our intention initially is to replace what's damaged, but the structural analysis may tell us that we need to replace the entire canopy out front. As you know, the exterior window structure and insulated panels have been done 5 years ago, Bob, I believe?
2 to 3 years ago.
2 to 3 years ago, Mr. Lester. So there's no sense in taking a look at any of that. The roof and all the edge metal's been replaced. So there's still also a little bit of work on the chimney that was damaged. So there's a little bit of exterior work, but I don't think it's going to change the look of the building itself. But everything that was damaged during the storm will be replaced.
I just want to urge, I know you're looking at this, I just want to make sure that anything that's important in that Fort Washington building, we should do now. I mean, I bring up the loudspeaker, the PA system. I mean, I don't know how well it works. I don't know if we have to rewire for the significantly damaged portion of the building, but you know, anything else that is really an opportunity for us to make that building, you know, what we want it to be for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So just consider that and just make sure we're doing everything that needs to be done. Is the sound system, Bob, you would know best what's in that building now.
The sound system actually had a slight upgrade when we redid the phones. We tied our sound system into the phone system, so all the paging announcements are done through the phone systems, which just feeds a simple amplifier feeding the speakers throughout the hallways and the classrooms.
And all that material that was damaged is being replaced as part of the storm damage. So in the back area there, you're going to get all new speakers, all new push buttons, all new wiring in those areas, and the code upgrades. When you move to parity, we would take a look at that stuff seems to be functioning well right now. So certainly if we were to find something, we would bring it to the district's attention, see what they want to do with it. But we did test everything out before we reoccupied Fort Washington in January.
Other comments or questions? Okay, so back to the agenda. Are members of the committee prepared to recommend this as written to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, all right, great. Moving on, next up is the agreement with Twining that we've discussed several times.
Yes, exactly. So the next couple items were mostly touched on as part of the presentation, so I'm happy to take any questions. The only thing I will point out is that the cost that's in the packet, there was a number that was transposed. It's $4,140,000, not $4,410,000. So that'll be updated for the legislative meeting. And again, that contract is part of the claim that'll be reimbursed through insurance proceeds.
Yeah, it looks like that number is correct on board docs. Maybe it's not on paper, I'm not sure. I don't have the paper in front of me, but, so items B, C, and D are all part of that. And E, actually, where is it? It's not correct. Oh, in the contract itself. Okay, so B, C, D, and E are all part of this. All right, any comments or questions on B, C, D, or E? Jenna, sorry.
All the way over here, can't see
Jen.
me. So my only question is, they said during the presentation that the athletic director, Matt Hyland, is putting things in order, how they're going to be done. Is that available if someone has a question, or should you contact Matt Hyland? You know, just occasionally we get questions about what's going on with the tennis courts, what's going on here. So how do we get that information?
Certainly, we get updates regularly from ICS. Matt Hyland has that information, so we certainly share with the board when we get updates, and Matt has that information. We meet with Matt on a weekly basis to give him updates on what's going on. So if anyone needs to know, but I think Matt is regularly sharing
That's the one.
information out.
And he has the order of the things are being done. Okay.
I think too, in our monthly newsletters that will continue throughout the summer, we can just put updates there just so that the entire public has it.
Other comments or questions on BCDRE? Art?
I just want to, so Twining Construction, this is just for the,
Claim.
Yeah, this is the claim area.
this is the claim
Yeah,
area,
the
but are we
claim area.
using Twining to do the parity and the
They
code?
ended up, yes, they ended up being low on the code area, or on the GISA area as well. I'm sorry, I'm getting.
Code and
confused.
parity.
Yeah, they also were low. So they were able to match those numbers that they were able to give you on the claim area. It made a lot of sense, and we were
Right,
very happy
that's-
that they
that's
ended
what
up
I
being
thought.
low.
So where do we see those numbers?
Those
Is
are
that
included.
part of the 12?
That's the 12, yeah. There's
Right.
only two numbers. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I know it is a little confusing, but there's only what you're getting with the claim and the GISA. Those are the only two numbers. And I know you have a lot of invoices that are coming out. All those are being covered by claim. So when you hear Bill talking, literally all of that is claim work that they're working with Utica. Utica's matching up and making sure that those contractors are of the correct value, and then they're going to reimburse the district. So that all kind of goes under, we'll call it the claim. Everything else that you've heard Michael talk about is under the GISA. So that, remember, the GISA was going to match everything that the claim was not going to do to make the building look and feel new, because otherwise you were going to have this whole area that was kind of brand new and everything else old. And in your facility condition assessment, you still had to do that work. So it was like, at this time, if we could put it all together, that's what we were going to do, because this is the time to do it when you're going to already be doing the work and you're already going to be moving the students around. Very hard to do it outside of that timeline.
Why is one section called code and the other
Yeah,
parity?
Yeah, and sorry, that's confusing too, because, so Utica will give you a certain amount of dollars for anything that's not up to code. So once we're doing the work and we're in those sections, if we find something that's not up to code, that's kind of separate. They don't technically, like putting it back how it was is sufficient. That's kind of what they're required to do, but since you uncovered a code issue and you're doing all this work, you should address it at that time. So in your policy, I guess your policy has a section that says we will pay for up to $1 million in code work. And there's a lot of code work in that other wing, even though there wasn't as much damage. So if you looked at the building, that, you know, the plan upper left-hand corner, that's tons of damage. The other side, a lot less damage, but there was a lot more things that were code-related that we had to do there. I know it's clear as mud, I apologize, but
okay.
it's a lot of moving
We're still
parts.
doing, the parity area also includes code that we're paying for.
Yes, there is some code upgrade there.
Right.
So like ADA bathrooms and things like that. Since you're addressing the rest of the building, you would be required to do it. Same with the sprinkler system. That's a little bit more of a you could or could not, but since you're in there doing it, that is the time to do that. Much harder to do once you put the ceilings back up and all the other items. So yeah, it would be a recommendation.
And keep in mind, as we're doing this, if we do this project, which I believe we should do it, we already have a plan in place to move students. So, you know, we're incurring the cost of the modulars. You know, we have a plan to move kids so that kids aren't moved multiple times. And if we don't do the work now and we have to come through and do the work again, it's going to add another disruption to another school year.
So I think we'll have all this terminology standardized next month, starting next month, and then we'll get Bill and Michael hats with the right words on them they can switch out as they.
Yeah,
as they,
we've been trying to make it as seamless as possible, but, you know, I'm sorry, that probably has some complexity to it as well. You know, it's just hard to get it all together in the common vernacular, but we'll be doing reporting. We'll work with Mr. Leckman and make sure it gets a little simpler moving forward.
Right, anybody else? All right, are we prepared for items B, C, D, and E to move to legislative?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, me too, thank you. On to the Chromebook repair agreement. Gosh, you gave us a little bit of a heads up on this last month, I think.
You are correct. I did give you a heads up with this. So since 2019, we've used Stay Mobile as our repair shop for all of our Chromebooks. In May of this year, the tech directors in Montgomery County learned that Stay Mobile had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which obviously created a huge hiccup for all of us in trying to maintain our fleet, making sure our repairs are done in a timely manner and so forth. I reached out to the vendors that we have relationship with that provide technologies to us for recommendations and guidance regarding what our next steps could be to continue with having our Chromebooks repaired. Bloom had offered to take on the Chromebook repairs for those Chromebooks that were purchased through them that had warranty terms left over. So Bloom will be covering 700 of our Chromebooks that were leased in 2020. The repairs will be the same as it was under the warranty from Stay Mobile. So those are 700 devices that we don't have to worry about purchasing additional warranty at all. What that does leave us with are the Chromebooks that were leased in 2021. Those Chromebooks, Bloom has offered to provide warranty service under a new agreement, a 2-year agreement. You have the contract in front of you. The coverage for the repairs is the same exact as what Stay Mobile had offered us, nothing different. So Bloom would then cover all of our Chromebook repair that would be needed. I think that was all that I had to share with that one. Any questions that you have regarding the new agreement?
Yeah.
Do you have a number of Chromebooks sitting as available for loan as loaners so that students are still able to have access?
Right, so we had enough Chromebooks in hand to support any of those Chromebooks that student reported for having repairs after Stay Mobile had gone out of business. So we were able to sustain allowance of Chromebooks to give to kids as loaners.
And in terms of the length or the turnaround time, do you have any sense is their turnaround time going to be similar to what you're used to?
For the repairs?
Yeah.
So I did ask that question because that is a big factor for us. The data that they shared with me showed 2-week turnaround time from the time they receive the device at their depot. And they provide us with the shipping labels, the packaging material, and everything else. So as soon as we release it from our hands, they get into their hands, it's a 2-week turnaround period. They'll also provide us with additional data that Stay Mobile did not provide us with, such as being able to have live tracking of where the repair is in the process, and also provide us with additional information regarding the individual device. So for example, if the device has been sent to their repair shop 3 times, it will give us that report that the device had been sent to them for repairs for the following repairs.
And you mentioned that some of the other districts in Montgomery County had similar situation. Are you all moving to Bloom, or is this now an individual?
It's an individual decision.
And is there any benefit in sort of making this part of a larger thing? I mean, combine it with other districts, or is this always separate by district?
Bloom provides Chromebooks to some of the neighboring school district, North Penn, I believe Abington as well. So they're supporting those districts with the repair shop, but it's not uniform across the county that we're all using Bloom.
Right, so this is not like a co-star kind of arrangement. This is purely Upper Dublin and Bloom. All right, thanks.
Did we recover any of the money that we paid State Mobile?
No.
Was that lost?
It's lost.
So how much did we lose from that?
It'll be the 2 years worth of warranty service, which is about the same as this contract.
140?
About, yes.
Insurance, does anybody cover that?
So I think we believe it's lost. I don't know that we can say that definitively. We've talked to First American, who we did our lease through, and what First American does as part of the lease is they pay all of the vendors up front, which is what Stay Mobile would have asked if we had contracted with them directly. They would have said, you have 3 years, pay us our 3 years. So there are bankruptcy proceedings that need to happen. So Bloom is actually representing us as part of those bankruptcy proceedings for some of our devices. So I think we'll see what comes out of bankruptcy. I think Chapter 7, it's highly unlikely that we'll see much of anything. I think getting the devices back is the biggest challenge that we're hoping to at least be able to recover the devices.
And that process has started already. We've given them the serial numbers that were sent, serial numbers for the Chromebooks that were sent to Stay Mobile. And
How many
would help us.
do they have?
They have about 200 of ours, which is small compared to some of our surrounding school district. I know it sounds like high, like North Penn is upwards in 700 something, so.
Anyone else? Jeff?
Prakash, if you know, just from your working in the industry, what happened to Stay Mobile? Is it a one-off, or is like this an endemic problem in the repair industry?
I think it's one-off.
And with Bloom, you feel comfortable that they're pretty solid company?
Well, one of the advantages of Bloom is not only do they offer the repair service, but they also sell the devices as well. So they have different pathways for generating revenue, whereas Stay Mobile was strictly repair, and that was it.
Anyone else? All right, we're prepared to move. Oh, sorry, Jenna.
Sorry, this, not specific to this particular vendor, but Andy, do we do any kind of monitoring, financial monitoring of vendors? I know kind of in the risk management space, that's something that, publicly traded companies will do at times, but have we ever thought about that?
We don't do that for most vendors. I think large contracts, that is part of what we request for bids, is to provide financial information. But, for $100,000, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but if we were reviewing financials for every vendor, we'd be doing a lot of review of vendors. So, but yeah, certainly the large type contracts, that is something they need to provide.
Okay, so are we prepared to move this item to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Prakash.
Thank you.
Moving on, Sandy Run update, Bob?
Sure. So since the last time we talked, we now have our substantial completion certificates from the contractors. They continue to work on their punch list. We expect most of them to be out of the building by June 20th. The other big news is we do have a temporary certificate of occupancy from the township, so we can start occupying our building with our staff during the summer hours. So at the end of this week, the existing staff, the 12-month staff, will be moving over into Sandy Run. As of Monday, they will be in their offices working. So our staff will be over there. A lot of other items have been completed as well. Lately, the planetarium has been completed. Training is ongoing over the past week. Teachers were in there with the planetarium consultant learning what they can do with the system, how to use the system. Also, if you drive by, the turf has gone down on the field outside. That we call that the multi-purpose field. So that is turf. The contractor.
Just clarify, sod.
Sod. I'm sorry, sod. Yes. Yeah, natural turf. Yes, sod. Yes. Yeah. That is down. The contractor is responsible for watering that all through the summer. So they will be maintaining it, watering it, cutting it for our staff once we take over that. Again, we'll be able to be on there. It'll be fine if students are walking on there during lunch, sitting on there. But we really should not do any play on that field for the next year. Other items that are going on, a lot of the site work is going on. Loading dock is paved, which is great because our moving contractors have started. The furniture is being delivered and assembled, and we completed the move of the library at this time. So the books are in, and Monday the movers come back to start moving all the teaching items out of the classrooms. There's not a lot of furniture that's moving with us, very little. But all the teaching items, art supplies, kitchen supplies, everything will be moved over into the new building. And work will continue throughout the summer. Demolition is the big key for the summer of how next fall will play out for us. The demolition contractors are actually looking at classrooms. They'll be sitting in the parking lot, and as the teachers are walking out of the building Thursday, they're going to be walking into the building to get started. So there's not a lot of time. We won't be able to do walkthroughs for the building because we do need to shut power down to the old building right away so they can start the demolition process, remove the telephone poles so the new driveway can go in, the retaining wall can go in, and all the site work that will continue. So it'll be a very busy summer for site work.
Just before I move on to budget, just to highlight, I was in the building with Steve on Friday, I think. One of the exciting things about the planetarium, Mr. Miller was there and talking effusively about how excited and impressed he was by what the possibilities were, including the possibility of having students here at the high school generating content, using a portable system to bring it there, bring it to this building, generate content, and then use it in the planetarium. There's all kinds of new possibilities. All right, budget. Andy.
There's nothing major updated since last month. The only thing I will note is on the second page of the budget document, there's project budget risk areas. Number of open items remain. I did add paving costs, so as part of a typical contract, there is a language that's included as oil is a volatile commodity. So you don't typically see it happen, but with the increase in oil prices since the beginning of the project, I did ask Dewey to put together an estimate of what that could potentially cost us as part of the contract, and they're estimating, based on today's prices, $80,000 as the potential cost increase for that. So you can see there's still a number of areas that the project is trending positively and under budget, but that's a number that I just got this morning, and I'll drop in here, and we'll continue to monitor all these areas of the budget. But again, still trending very positively.
Yeah, that's one we can't pre-stage. Any comments or questions on the update or the budget? Art? You're well over your 3 questions
I know.
tonight, I think.
I thought it was 30. No update on the landfill situation.
There is no update. The township has released the bids for the project. We expect over the next 15 to 25 days to get the bid back. Again, where we're at right now is whatever prices they get back as part of the bid for their park project. Our understanding is the township has passed along the full cost of us to take the fill there as part of their project. So we're still waiting on bids to come back on their project.
Okay. So hope it should be done next month or 2. Yeah. Okay. And Bob, do you have any idea how many solar panels are up in that? I mean, I looked at the roof. It looked like we had 4 or 5 roofs with panels. Is that right?
Yes, there's significant levels. It's on top of the gymnasium, on top of the auditorium, hallways, above the kitchen. So I don't have a total count. I can get that for you.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
There's a lot.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Jenna?
How's the parking situation looking? That neighborhood that feeds into it is near and dear to my heart. So yeah, I just want to see how we're progressing on that.
We're still making plans that we'll be able to have teachers parking, that we're looking at around 120 to 140 spots for the beginning of the year. We're still keeping everything else as contingency. As long as demo goes as expected, we don't see any hiccups at this point. As long as that moves along, we will be ready. And that was worst case scenario.
Ultimately, the vision is to be able to do unified back-to-school nights. Dr. Ortiz knows for next year, because of the parking issue, we'll still have to do multiple nights for events.
Mike? Okay. Anybody else? All right, thank you for that update. Next up, item H, the BDA installation for Sandy Run.
Mr. Sirota, I'm sorry, can I
Yep.
make one comment?
Sure.
Within the next week, we will release the date of the grand opening ceremony for Sandy Run. It will most likely be the first week in August, and that day will include tours for the community as well.
Great. Okay, moving on to the amplifier. Who's got that one?
Yeah, I'll
Bob?
take that. What this is Montgomery County's radio system. It doesn't always penetrate buildings. So it is part of the building code that we have a system in the building where they can retransmit the signals from the police, ambulance, and fire radios while they're operating inside the buildings, that they have clear communications with each other, with the county. The reason this system is coming up now and not earlier in the job is there's really no way to predict what the signal strength was going to be until the building was enclosed and built. So we did have it in the contract for Borough Electric that they brought a company in, Land Mobile, to do a study. They went through the building with their equipment, identified if there's only 2 or 3 areas where we had low signal that need to be amplified, and it was mostly the inner hallways and lower level is where they hit some dead spots. So the system is $29,357 is to install that system. We've worked with Land Mobile in the past. They've installed the system. This building has a system in it as well. I believe that the system we're putting in now is going to be less extensive. We're closer to a county tower. But this will take care of all the signal problems, and they are a CoStar's contractor.
Was this, is there a dollar amount for this in the budget already, or is this additional cost? Contingency.
This is part of the furniture and equipment of the building, which is trending over budget. So yes, ultimately, that will be funded from the contingency.
Okay, thank you. So other comments or questions on this? All right, we'll move it forward.
One comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Darlene.
One comment. When I was looking at this, I just think it's really important when you talk about signals and being able to communicate with, first responders and things like that, that it's critically important. So I was really happy to see that this was in here because safety is ultimately, what we're always concerned about for our staff and our students.
So we'll move this forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Next up, our regular monthly disposal of excess, obsolete, and non-repairables. Anything to mention? No, okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move that forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Monthly financials, Andy.
Yeah, so I will walk through the monthly financials again from the treasurer's report from May. Everything is still trending very much where we expected to. So revenues 95% received to date compared to 95% last year. Expenses are 84% year to date, which is slightly higher than 78% last year. And again, that is solely due to the $3.7 million transfer to the capital reserve that was approved in May and was processed in May. On the other financial reports, the first page is updated. I just note that to match our current draft of the 22-23 budget. On assessment changes, there were 118 homes damaged in the tornado, which we had reduced assessments for. We are actually, as of the last report that came in, starting to see some of those assessments come back online. So I actually added a secondary line item so we can see the damaged homes, and then you can see kind of what's been restored as a separate line item. So 7 homes were restored, and we saw those assessments come back to where they were prior to the damage. Still a whole lot more restoration to be done. And then there were 7 additional assessments from the enclave. So we have gone, or 81 of the 115 units in that development have been assessed as of this most recent report. As far as earned income tax, we set another new largest month for earned income tax collections at $1.5 million. So you can see that's the highest bar on the chart. You can see there it's a 21% increase over the prior year in May. May is, as you can see from the chart, regularly the highest collection period, as it's the highest quarter, but it's also the first month after the tax filing deadline. So that's where you get your large influx of earned income tax payments there. And then transfer tax, we had 49 transactions totaling $175,000 in revenue, which was another strong month. There was one large commercial transaction which generated over $31,000 of that total. Revenue and expense projections is the report we've been looking at on a regular basis here, and there are just a couple items to note there. So on the local revenue improved by over $650,000 from last month, and again, that's primarily related to EIT coming in much stronger than we had projected, than prior year trends. And we also had a refund, what we call refund of coded as refund of prior year expense of $140,000. So we participate in a workers' compensation consortium with SDIC. SDIC is continuing to see very strong trends or positive trends as far as claims go. And as far as the financial status, the strength of the organization. So SDIC returned $7.5 million to member districts this year, which was great, and our portion of that was $140,000. So that attributed for some of those increased trends on revenue. All other expenses on the expense side, there's a reduction of about $4.1 million from last month. And again, most of that is related to the transfer of capital reserve, the $3.7 million. Again, that falls in that all other category outside of wages and benefits. So right now, we are trending towards a final surplus of about $3.3 million, and we will continue to update this report and share it on a monthly basis.
Okay, comments or questions? All right, all looking good? Nobody? We'll move that forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and yes, thank you. Budgetary transfers, anything to say? All right. Any comments or questions on the budgetary transfers? Move that forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, and on to the final budget.
Yes, the final budget. So after 10 months of long work, we've talked about it in this committee just about every single month. We have reached the end of our the cycle that we go through to develop our final budget for the 22-23 fiscal year. So while the work of the budget is never really done, we've reached the point where we have to, the board has to take formal action to approve and set a tax rate for the next fiscal year. So as we've been working through the details of the budget since preliminary in December, tonight what I'll be providing is an overview. There's not a ton of changes from what we shared as part of the proposed final budget last month, but I'll walk through the changes. And certainly, as I mention every month, included in the paper packet and in board docs, there is a 27-page budget narrative which includes all of the details of our budget. So if there's questions about any of the details in there, I'd be happy to answer those. Gotta turn it on. So here's our regular timeline. Again, we've been going through this, and only one step remains here is approval of the final budget at the legislative meeting next week. So as I reviewed last month, I'm happy to continue to present a structurally balanced budget where revenues match expenses. This is being accomplished with a 2.3% tax increase, which is what we discussed last month. As a reminder, the budget was developed using a needs-based budget philosophy and process. We did that on both the expense side, the revenue side, and on the expense side, it also gets into staffing, personnel, benefits, all of those things. We use a needs-based budget process to make sure that we are funding the budget to meet the needs of all of our students, all of our staff, and not have extra in the budget where it's not needed. So every one of our budget owners spends time with their budget. It's a process developed by the business office, and everyone plays their role in developing their specific needs in the budget because we certainly know the district-wide and what it all rolls up to, but every building and department knows their building and department and is best suited to define what the needs are for that department. So as far as the summary goes, our proposed final budget includes revenues of $111,970,132, which is an increase of $704,000, again, as compared to last month, and I'll explain why that significant increase. It includes expenditures of $111,128,834, which is an increase of $682,000. And based on those changes, again, what we were doing was using the transfer, a planned transfer to the capital reserve to balance the budget out at zero. So we have a planned transfer of $841,298, and there is no planned usage of fund balance needed to balance this budget. So highlighting some of the changes, so revenue increased by $704,000, and that's being driven by, in the last month, which was the April property tax assessments, factoring that in from primarily new developments, we were able to increase revenues by $216,000. EIT increased by $100,000 based on, again, we talked about it, increasing trends and our 5-year average, so I feel very comfortable with that. And we are still a little bit conservative on that, which gives us room. State FICA and PSERS subsidy increase of $24,000 due to salary increases, which I'll talk about on the expenditure side of the budget. And then we also added, as part of this final budget, $363,000 of revenue of planned usage of ESSER 3 ARP funds. This is not new revenue, so we have revenue that is available to us through the stimulus funding. Basically what this is we're planning to use a portion of that ESSER funding next year, primarily for the learning loss set aside as part of our ARP plan. Later on in the budget at the end, you'll see we actually linked the plan in here. We reviewed the plan with this committee and the full board, but this is planned usage of that. If you remember, most of our ESSER ARP funding we're planning to use for HVAC upgrades to our elementary facilities. On the expense side, we increased by $704,000, essentially to match the revenue increase. And where the increases come from there, so as was reported out, we are happy to report that we've finalized, or we're hoping to approve a contract next week with UDSD, the final contract. So we added in all of the planned increases as part of year one of that agreement, just to make sure the budget accurately reflects all of the salary and benefits items in that agreement. The fuel prices are something, obviously, and I'll note back there, that's where the increase on the PSERS and FICA subsidy comes from. So as we have higher salaries, we do generate more of a subsidy from the state funding source, the state reimbursement of PSERS and FICA. Fuel prices, obviously you see the pumps, the price at the pumps continue to go up. There's only so much we can do to plan for that. As we don't have a transportation facility, we are buying at the pump right now. We believe we're covered to what we're paying today. We have no idea, as no one does, where prices are going tomorrow or into the future. So we hope they stabilize, but it is a risk area for us in the budget. Obviously, Prakash, Mr. Patel talked about our Chromebook warranty, so we did add $70,000 into the budget to make sure we have that covered as well. ESSER 3, this is the exact offset of the revenue, so we plugged in what expenditures we needed for ESSER for next year, $363,000. This is the offset exact to the revenue side. And then capital reserve, the recommendation is to continue planning to proactively fund the capital reserve, and it balances the budget at zero with a 2.3% tax increase. So on the property tax increase side, again, this is a similar slide to what we looked at last month. So this basically shows the board where we're at. The budget currently maintains a 2.3% property tax increase and what that is a $164 increase for properties at the median assessed value of $197,250. Again, the slide shows an alternate option to show the impact of a reduction down to 2%. There could be versions beyond that, so I note that each 0.1% reduction would be a reduction of $85,000 property taxes revenue, but a reduction to 2% If we stay within the 2 to 2.3% range, that would be a reduction of the capital reserve transfer of $256,000 if there was a reduction to 2%. So such a reduction would mean we would go to the capital reserve transfer. It wouldn't create a deficit in our budget, and the capital reserve transfer would come down to $655,298. So at 2%, it would be a $143 increase for a property at the median assessed value. This is a new slide that I reviewed last year in the June presentation, and it's important to just give a quick review of fund balance as we approach the end of the year, mainly to assure that fund balance remains in compliance with Board Policy 620. So what this slide shows you here, or what the chart in here shows you, is an estimate. The first column is an estimate for 21-22 budget, which was developed when we approved the budget, and we showed an ending fund balance of $7.86 million, which was 7.3% of budgeted expenditures. After the year was closed and the audit was completed, there was an ending unassigned fund balance of $9.56 million. And then the 22-23 budget is structurally balanced, which means the ending unassigned fund balance will still be $9.56 million, even if all surplus funds are transferred to the capital reserve fund, which could mean the board would be out of compliance with their fund balance policy. So what I'm recommending, and again, I believe the surplus to the capital reserve that we processed last month covers this, but this is just a way to make sure the board is fully in compliance with their board policy, is a recommendation to increase the current committed fund balance for real estate assessment appeals by $1 million. And I think that's a reasonable assessment because this accomplishes a number of key items. Fund balance policy management. So if there was a transfer of $1 million, there would be a 7.6% ending unassigned fund balance at 2.3% or 7.7% at 2%. And it takes steps to address the uncertainty in the commercial real estate market, which we all know exists right now. So slide 8 really gets into why just the real estate assessments and why not our other committed fund balance of healthcare stabilization. So real estate assessments, we have a current balance, our committed fund balance of only $1.5 million compared to $2.6 million for healthcare stabilization. Our top 10 properties, assessed properties, account for over 11% of total district assessed value. And 3 of the top 5 properties will have the same owner when if the Prudential property agreement settles. So BET Investments will be the owner of the, you see here, the Promenade, Prudential, and 200 Dryden Road, all 3 of our top 5 assessed values. Property tax revenue is also a major uncovered liability, which I think we saw in the storm damage, where we don't have insurance, and to date, I haven't found insurance that covers you for loss of assessed value as a result of storm, fire, earthquake damages to properties or assessed value. So I feel like we're a little under committed there to the risk associated with real estate assessments. Healthcare stabilization, we do currently have a committed fund balance of $2.6 million. We have a consortium balance in our healthcare consortium of $2.8 million. So we have a total available fund balance to deal with healthcare costs of $5.4 million, which represents about 6 months of billed premiums, which I feel is very strong. So I don't see the need to increase that committed fund balance at this point in time, but certainly we could in the future if we felt it necessary. This is our typical slide for expense and revenue trends. Again, I won't go through this in too much detail. We've talked about this slide quite a bit, but this just shows you between the orange and gray lines what that change from a 2.3 down to a 2% tax increase would do if we stay in that range. It's a reduction of about $250,000 a year. Act 1 trends, so again, similar slide, won't go through this, but I think the important note is you can see that from 17-18 forward, the final tax increases have been below the Act 1 increase, and you can see here too, as the Act 1 increase has gone up, the property tax increase has flattened out and is starting to trend away from the Act 1 index, which I think is good. Homestead exclusion, so Homestead, this is the same as last month. We did have from the county one additional property that was approved, so the numbers changed ever so slightly. The one item I want to point out here is, again, so the increase from 80% to fully funded at the state level, as an example, if the board approves a 2.3% tax increase, this will be a $69 reduction for every home, the same regardless of their assessed value. It will look like the increase is less, and it's hard to explain to all property owners why that happened. So it's going to look like a good guy for the property tax increase. What's unknown is if they will continue to fully fund that in the future, and what happens if next year they go back to 80%, so then the tax increase looks worse. So it's definitely a benefit to taxpayers in the state, but we don't know what to expect from that in the long run. And then major budget open items, yes, we're at the end of the budget cycle. There's still a whole lot of things that are unknown that we can only trend out. We can't predict. I think the biggest open item, which again continues to be a mystery to me, is the state budget is on a similar timeline as to school district budgets. We must have our budget. The board must approve a budget by June 30th each year. The state, June 30th technically is when they have to have it approved, but that's not as stringent as for school districts. So we don't know what we're going to get from the state next year. We have no indication of what our revenue will be from the state. I don't believe it'll go down, but could it go up? Sure. Could it go up significantly? Maybe. But school districts don't have the ability to plan for that increase because we have no idea what it's going to be. And to me, it doesn't seem to make sense. On the expense side, so charter school, we're definitely seeing getting some positive feedback on charter schools. We have 6 students that either they've confirmed that they're coming back, not registered yet. 2 that one is graduating early, one is a student in special education that is scheduled to graduate at the end of this year. So none of those are finalized, but again, if all of those come through, then we would see positive benefit to our expense budget next year. We also don't have any placeholders for additional charter school students, so we don't expect to get any additional charter school students, but if there are, that would help fund some of that. And then these are just additional resources. Again, I showed you the top one last month. The one I added was our stimulus funding plan because it's not all that easy to find on the website. So I know there's sometimes questions about it. It's right here in the presentation in case there's any questions. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to, or my recommendation would be to take questions on the presentation first. And then the next agenda item are the resolutions where I think we can have a discussion. My recommendation would be to discuss the tax increase there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's do that. Let's not focus on the bottom line number quite yet, but first, any comments or questions on the presentation? Okay, I'll go. Oh, Jen. Okay. I have a couple. So first, question for you, Andy, on slide 4, which is showing the change from the proposed final to this one. Now we say transfer to capital reserve of $841,000, but on slide 6 we're showing a transfer to capital reserve of $911,000. Why is that not the same number?
Because I missed updating that.
Okay, so which is the right number?
The right number is $841,000.
Okay, all right. On the just a question on the slide with the one that you always show, slide 9, which shows the lines, the trend of fund balance over time, or budget over time. The orange and gray line, is the difference for those just you just subtracted a fixed dollar amount from each column? Is that what's happening?
Correct. So the difference, what's happening there is the difference between revenue, if you go from 2.3 to 2, is $256,000.
Okay, but it's
that runs forever. So that's $256,000 of lost revenue.
Isn't it? But isn't the next year 256 times 1.02? Because you have a 2%.
Sure, but I mean, I don't think that would show on the scale of this chart.
Maybe, but they're actually diverging apart slightly, right?
I think if you open that up, yes, ever so slightly, they would be diverging apart, yes.
All right, I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. All right, other comments or questions on the, Jen?
Okay, if we transfer that extra money to the real estate assessments, how long does it have to stay in that bucket?
So committed fund balance is committed with board action. It can also be uncommitted with board action. So it sits there until we need it for real estate assessments that may cause us to need those funds. So if the board accepts that recommendation, $1 million would be moved and it would sit there and can only be used for real estate assessments unless the board took action to do something else with those funds.
And can I just clarify just a terminology thing? It's not technically a transfer, it's a commitment. It's sitting there in the general fund as it already is. It's just committed to a particular purpose. So transfer is not actually the right word in this case. Commitment is the
But you could move it out with board approval as opposed to capital reserve.
Correct. Capital reserve is a one-way trip.
Okay.
Committed fund balance is board action, and it remains in the general fund and can be uncommitted by board action.
Great, thank you.
Other comments or questions on the presentation, Jenna?
So along the lines of Mark's question, if the 9, on slide 6, if the 911 is actually the 800 something, does the 655 come down as well? Or is that in the 2% option?
I believe it does, yeah. There were some changes that were happening at the last minute, and I think both of those numbers need to be adjusted.
In any case, the number in the right column should be the number from slide 4, which is 841,000 minus 256, whatever that is.
That's correct, and I will make sure that is updated for the legislative meeting as an attachment.
Just want to confirm that the projection of increased revenue from the new properties coming online in the out years is still on the conservative side?
Correct. So the out years, there is no planned increase of new revenue because we don't know when it's going to settle. So I've been taking the conservative approach to only plan it in when it actually happens. Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Art?
So Andy, I compared the 2021-22 revenue and expense project report from last month to this month to see what the difference was in addition to the transfer that we made of $3.7 million. It looked like we were to the good approximately 200,000. Correct?
You're, just to be sure while he's digging that out, you're talking about the report from the monthly financials.
The monthly, yeah. The third
report in the monthly financial report.
Yeah, which presents the revenue expenditure projection report.
Are you looking at total expenses or just?
I'm looking at the bottom.
The all other?
I'm looking at the favorable and unfavorable. In May, it's $4,049,000
Bottom right.
plus 3.7.
Bottom right number.
Yeah, bottom right. And I compared that to April's number.
Correct. I mean, that sounds about right? Because there was, revenue trended better than we expected. Salaries and benefits trended slightly better than the projections have been trending.
Yeah, and again, I just want to just make sure that my colleagues understand that when we're doing the final budget, we're looking at budget to budget. We're not looking at year-end projection to next year's budget. Year-end projection was over $7 million to the good. We transferred already $3.7 million. We're going to see later tonight, we're going to be considering a motion to move additional funds over once the audit is completed. So it's a little subtle, but you know, when we talk about how much we're going to put into capital reserve, the money that's being reduced, you know, that Jenna mentioned, but there will be additional transfers most likely to capital reserve based on the final audit. Right now, even taking the $3.7 million and transferring that last month, we're still, for the good, approximately $4 million. Do you agree?
I agree with that. Remember, a large portion, I'm not saying expenses aren't under budget, but a large portion of that is from revenues.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of
Oh,
the
I'm
revenues
not
that we're
blaming
seeing.
you. It's EIT.
No, I'm just making sure I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean,
It's about equivalent on both sides of the ledger, the revenue and expense side.
Right. And also, I think following the state budget, it's unlikely, maybe Dr. Yanni would chime in, it's unlikely that we're not going to get any increase whatsoever in either BEF or special ed. They're looking for the sky, but
It'll be de minimis.
yeah, there'll be some.
Anyone else? Comments on the presentation? Okay. So let's move on to the resolution. So item M on the agenda is the resolution for the legislative meeting where we would actually set the tax rate. So I don't know if there's anything specific to say about the resolution. We've seen this before, what these would look like, but this is our opportunity to weigh in on what we think the final, it doesn't set a percentage, it sets a millage rate, but we'll calculate that millage rate from the percentage that we recommend. Anyone want to weigh in on how you feel about the current recommendation of 2.3%?
Mr. Sirota?
Yes.
So yes, we're talking about a recommendation of 2.3%, but Mr. Leckman and I feel very comfortable anywhere between the low of 2 and the high of 2.3.
Right, thank you for clarifying, and just, again, for point of clarification, it's great to know that they're comfortable in that range of 2 to 2.3. We are free as a board to go below or above that if we want, and they'll have to make it work, whatever it is that we decide. I can't imagine that's likely to happen with this board, but just to clarify, we have the authority here. Darlene, you got a thumb on the mic, yeah.
Made it green, so. I really feel that I would like to come in at the 2%. I think that we will continue to get revenue from throughout, our township with all the new developments. So even though we can't say exactly what will be coming in, we know money is coming in. And so I think we have an opportunity to come in at the 2% increase, knowing that the administration is comfortable with that. So for me personally, I won't entertain 2.3. I would support a 2.0.
Okay, anybody else? Jeff?
I'm going to echo exactly what Darlene said. I think last month I was at 2.17 or some random number like that I came up with in my head. But I think I would advocate going down to the 2 based on the numbers in the presentation and all the data. Again, I want to thank the district and Andy and everybody for getting to a structurally balanced budget. And doing the math down to 2, we're still at about just under $600,000 going to capital reserve, which I also think is great. So I'd advocate going down to 2.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mike?
I also echo the thanks to the administration. I think this is a reflection of several years of needs-based budgeting. Our expenditures are very much under control. And of course, we're fortunate to have a very strong revenue base and that, fingers crossed, continues to grow. So 2% as my support.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else. Remember, the members of the committee are going to have to, Art, go ahead.
I was waiting. Yeah, I strongly recommend that we bring it down to 2%. Last month, I briefly described how the Homestead Exclusion Act will significantly benefit community in Upper Dublin. The median tax increase would be $143 if we were at 2%, but you then subtract the Homestead Exclusion Act, and it's $74. $74 is what the tax increase is going to be. And I cannot think of a better time for us to implement the 2%. When you look at the significant costs that everybody in our community is suffering right now, just getting to work every day, the price of gas, all the other expenses, food, grocery, everything. So I think, I strongly suggest that we move to 2%. My only concern, Andy, you brought it up, was with the Homestead Exclusion Act next year, if they don't fund it at 100%, we're going to get blamed for that, increase on the tax bill. Right now, people will look, I'm getting a 2% increase, but when I calculate it, it's not 2%. It is lower. I didn't take the time to see what it actually would equate to, but it is going to be lower than 2% because of the 60
increase in the tax that we will get blamed for. And if we go low this year, that leaves us less room to counter that next year. So having a little extra buffer in case that happens would be nice. But my position is, my main thing this year is I think this year and especially starting next year, and I want to build it into budget assumptions for next year, I think we need to have a planned transfer to capital reserve every year. That needs to become the habit, the norm, the regular course of business. A meaningful transfer to fully fund that, because as I said last month, I hope my plan would be to be done borrowing for a bit, but the way we're going to fund that $30-ish million minus whatever we're doing for Fort Washington, et cetera, of work that we need to do to the buildings is through that planned transfer to capital reserve every year. So I want to get us into the habit of having something in there this year as a start is really important. I don't think that, however, that there's a really meaningful difference between the 800 something and the, what do you have the actual numbers now?
It's 841,298 and 585,298.
Yeah, so that $256,000 difference is not, I mean, to be clear, that's not enough of a regular plan transfer for me, but we did already, as Art pointed out earlier, we've already transferred a bunch this year, and we may transfer more depending on how the year end works out. But just to get us in the habit. So I'm comfortable anywhere in this 2 to 2.3 range. I'm interested to hear how, we did hear from Mike, but I'm interested to hear from Jenna and Titia because we need to make a recommendation for the legislative meeting.
Yeah, so I'm similarly comfortable in this range. I'm, by nature a saver. And so I definitely, the whole debate is really at the end of the day about how much we're putting in the capital reserve. That's really all it's about. So I agree, given how much we've already transferred, and it looks like, fingers crossed, we're going to have more to transfer. I'm comfortable, but I'm just going to go on record saying I agree with what you said, Mark. I think we need to get in the habit, depending on how much we're able to transfer in the future, of budgeting even more. So I can't promise we'd be able to come in at this level in the future, because I do think it's critically important for us to transfer money to the capital reserve. We all saw how much we have to spend at FWES. Things happen, and I think it's everybody's goal not to have to borrow money. So again, I can get comfortable in the 2% range, but I'm kind of laying expectations, at least for me, for the future, is that we're going to be, putting in a sizable, budgetary item for a transfer.
Yes, that leaves me to say something, right? To be honest, I think I was more at the 2.3 originally at the beginning of this meeting. Hearing that the administration is comfortable with a 2 to 2.3%, I think is very good to know. My hunch is that the expenditures, once we're all said and done with Fort Washington, we're going to see higher tag that exactly, and I think that will continue to just the reality of the current situation of costs, not just materials but wages and everything else, transportation. So that has me somewhat concerned. But if I add up the numbers and everywhere else, I could go along with the 2.0.
Anyone else? Who didn't we get? Anyone? Did we get everyone already? Andy?
I think I would echo what Jenna and Titi have said to a certain degree. I also believe it's really important to keep looking forward. We do have buildings that are aging and they're going to need improvements, and it does concern me a bit where you take a little bit off the top on this year, you say, well, we'll get it next year. I know what we've contributed already last month, but it does weigh on me a bit, to be honest. I'm not a saver, so I do realize what we're talking about, but I also have concerns about what inflation is going to look like for us in the next 12 months. And I don't think we should kid ourselves that it's going to be a quick and easy trip up the inflationary range and down again. It's not. Everything that I read says it's going to be an extended process. And that means all of our costs are going up. And so 12 months from now, when we're talking about transportation and wages and food, that does concern me. So while things are sunnier right now, I don't like what the economy looks like as a whole. And while I am significantly concerned about making sure that people pay less in taxes, maybe just right now, it does concern me what it looks like 12 months from now. So, I mean, I can go along with a 2% increase, but I also think we need to think hard and long about, are we really going to be in a position next year and the year after to make the kind of commitments we're going to need to make to save the money we're going to need to save to improve the buildings that are coming down the pike?
Yeah, to echo that, I'll get you in a sec, Jen. Just a reminder for everybody, these compound. If we take 2.0 this time, then the increase next, the money we can never get back in the Act 1 environment. If it were to really go south, if the economic direction would really go south, then that's a risk. But it's a risk also for the taxpayer. So, this is the taxpayers pooling their money to do public education. The question is, does the money sit in our capital projects fund, or does it sit in their pocket? Jen?
I will support what the administration recommends within that 2 to 2.3%. I definitely want us to have money to go into the capital fund so that we can fix up the schools that need fixing. I don't want to get, save a little on taxes, but then we can't, provide that excellent education for our students. So I'm okay with whatever they recommend, as long as there is going to be money to save.
Okay, and that is all 9 of us. I think we need to, they recommended a range. We need to recommend a number to put into the motion for next month. Not that it can't potentially change next month again, but to be nice to the administration, because they have a lot of paperwork to prepare, it would be nice to get as close to final as we can.
Monday night.
Monday, what did I say?
Next month.
Yeah, right, 36 years from now. So yeah, next week, next Monday, we need to have a number. I heard 4 of us say 2.0 and 5 of us kind of waffle somewhere in the 2.0 and 2.3 range. So I'm not sure what to recommend. I don't want to just have this conversation again next week. For those people who were specific, only people who were specific said 2.0. So how do we feel, members of the committee, about recommending 2.0? Or would you rather us recommend and have the vote again next month and see how it goes? Next week?
It's next week, Mark. My 2 cents is to put the motion in at 2. That's what I heard the most, and that doesn't mean people are locked into 2. I may not even come in at 2. I'm going to give it, obviously, a lot of thought in the next week, but that was the majority that I heard, so I'm comfortable with going in at 2 for next week.
2.0.
Okay, all right. So we will move this forward. I don't think I need to ask again. We'll move this forward with 2.0 for next week. Okay, then we have, let's take items N and O together. Maybe you want to explain what these are?
Sure, so I'll take NO and P together.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I
that's
think
what I
they
meant to-
all
that's
go
what I meant to
together.
do,
So item N is, per my presentation, is the recommendation to commit an additional $1 million for real estate assessment appeals in our general fund. So the committed fund balance, my attachment there gives all the rationale and recommendation. Again, I think we discussed a lot of the details. As transfer to capital reserve is one-way trip, so once it goes to capital reserve, it can't come back. This is just a reassignment of fund balance per the board's policy 620 from unassigned fund balance, which is general use, to committed for a specific purpose. It's committed by board action, it's uncommitted by board action the same way. So the recommendation is to add an additional $1 million prior to June 30th. Item O is, so what we have to do, item O and P are, if we have the intention to take end of year surplus, so after the audit is completed, and make additional commitments, we have to have a generic board motion on here to say, when we finish the audit and prior to December 31st, it has to happen prior to December 31st, which our audit is typically done by then, we may want to add additional commitments for real estate assessments or healthcare stabilization. And we also, I believe there's pretty strong support for taking end-of-year surplus and transferring it to capital reserve. So it's a motion that the board must make before the end of the fiscal year to take action prior to December 31st for balances as of year-end June 30th, 2022. So that's what those three motions. N is specifically making a commitment now. O and P are reserving the right to make a commitment and or transfer surplus to capital reserve after the final year-end audit is completed.
Comments or questions on those items? So right now, Andy, we have explicit commitments for real estate assessment appeals and for healthcare rate stabilization. Does this, I'm not foreseeing this happening, but we could theoretically commit funds for any purpose, or almost any purpose. Does this, as written, precludes us from establishing a different commitment only for those two items?
If there was desire to add additional categories, that would need to be added before the end of the year. So yes, this sets those two as the only two that you can commit, the board can commit funds to. If we wanted to add additional categories, that would be part of this motion.
Yep. I mean, lots of districts have commitments for a variety of other purposes. It's not standardized. It's for what you think you need.
Andy, I just want to make the point that if you think 2.5 million is a lot for assessment appeals, before you arrived at Upper Dublin, we had a $5 million assessment appeal that we had to pay out over 3 or 4 years. So it's not a lot, and I think, you know, we need you to give us some advice in terms of where you think that amount should really settle at. You know, is 2.5 enough, or should we continue to look at increasing that over the next few years?
And I think I think once we see the Prudential property settle and see where that lands, I think that'll be a big one. Certainly, I think that's why we want to leave this open, because by December, we'll know a whole lot more. And yeah, we'll absolutely look at this every year. So it's a good, and commercial properties make up 20% of our overall assessment. So there's a 11+% in our top 10, and then 20% is commercial. So it's a big liability to the district for sure.
I'll highlight that I was recently looking at some major properties elsewhere in the county, specifically malls. We're fortunate, for the first time, finally we're fortunate not to have a mall. Plymouth Meeting Mall, except King of Prussia, Plymouth Meeting Mall sold under foreclosure in November and lost 70% of its assessed value, 70%. So, and no, that was Montgomery Mall. Plymouth Meeting Mall also was reassessed downward by something like 60-something% in the last couple of years. So it is, I mean, it's not like, typically we've seen like lots of these assessment appeals and they move by a few percent. It is possible for huge motions, huge movement in big assessments. So it is it is some, and it isn't necessarily covered by insurance. So having a buffer to cover those kinds of things is really important. All right, so any other comments or questions on any of these three items? Okay, so are we prepared to move all three of them forward as they are?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Item Q, insurance policy renewals.
Yes, so we have annual insurance policies that need to be renewed. We currently work with Willis Towers Watson as our insurance broker to do this work for us and assist us through that process. For 22-23, there were no recommended changes to our insurance policies that we hold. That includes not renewing our insurance policy that covers international travel. Again, we don't have any current planned international travel until right now the end of next year. So next June, if everything moves forward for any international trips, we would just renew that at that time. So the current increase is about $92,000 from the prior year, which is a 17+% increase, which is currently anticipated in the budget that we just discussed. At the beginning of the year, Willis was actually estimating around 20% overall across all policies. And again, this is not related to our large claims. So when you look at, individual homeowner policies are, I think, driven by claims. Auto insurance is driven by accidents. This is really driven by the market and what's happening, I think, across the nation to insurance companies. There's been so many large claims due to natural disasters that's driving increases in the market in general. So two main areas that we're seeing increases are our commercial package, which shows almost a 30% increase. But I want to note that's likely to come down closer to 20%. At the moment, we have to carry coverage on both of our Sandy Run Middle School buildings. So the new building, we just received our TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy. So now that's no longer under our builder's risk insurance. That's part of our package policy, our commercial package policy. The current or the old building, we must maintain coverage on that until it's fully demolished, just in case anyone would get hurt or something would happen. If the building burned down, then all of that cleanup would need to be covered by insurance. So it's being held now. If it ends by September 1st, we would see about a $17,000 reduction in our annual claims, and then we would get a prorated amount of that back. So cyber liability insurance is another area. It's not new. We talked about this last year. Cyber liability is a massive, unstable market right now where there is so much cyber crime happening. There's a lot of it being directed at school districts directly. We just received a notification from the FBI through the MCIU that someone is targeting school districts in Bucks and Montgomery counties specifically. So this is just a huge issue that's going on right now that we're doing everything we possibly can to deal with this. So what you see before you was actually a placeholder. We still didn't even have a final number from our insurance company because they're working with our markets to get prices. So we had $27,000 as a placeholder. The number I just received this morning was $31,394. Which is an increase of over $10,000. Last year, we saw a $13,000 increase. And that final quote includes an increase in retention or deductible going from $25,000 to $50,000 and sublimits on ransom events at $100,000. So our insurance company is still actually marketing that. They're still trying to get another comparable quote, but there's not a ton of companies that are out there in this market that are, looking to provide this type of coverage because of how much is going on. So also to note, there's no premium increase on the E&O policy, but that's another area where the wrongful act deductible was increased from $10,000 to $25,000. So while there's no premium increase, we are seeing a deductible increase for any claims that come through. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, Andy, I just wanted to check the international travel. I thought the German exchange was starting before July 1st of 23, so...
So we wouldn't have to, so the policy would just go into effect as of June 1st, say. So we would wait till June 1st, and then the policy is good for
Sorry,
12
yeah,
months.
I
So,
got
you know,
1
it's a
month
good
of
question
that.
because I asked the same thing of our insurance company just to make sure. So that will give us the most bang for our buck.
Anyone else? All right, well, it's a big hefty increase, but insurance is a necessity. If that's what the market offers us right now, that's what it is. So members of the committee will move these forward?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. We have 2 settlement stipulations.
We do, 2 positive ones. So these are part of the district-initiated appeals from last year. So we recently settled 2 at numbers that are basically where we would expect them to come in. So 475 Virginia Drive is an increase of $16,865, and 715 Twining is an increase of $17,079 on an annual basis. So 2 more positive results on district-initiated appeals.
Okay, comments or questions? Move those forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Fund depositories.
Yes, I'll take TU and V together if that's okay. So the
Yeah.
next 3 items are annual items that we bring to the board at this time. So each year the board is asked, and we just talked about this in policy, to approve our annual depositories. So item T is to approve the annual depositories that we use for district funds. Item U is all of our cooperative purchasing agreements that we request approval to use for purchasing. So cooperative purchasing agreements give us the ability to purchase quickly, efficiently, and make sure we're in compliance with all of our local and state purchasing requirements. And then item V approves summer 2022 payments, as there is currently no committee meetings or board meetings scheduled for July. This motion just allows the business office to continue to operate and pay bills throughout the summer so they don't turn our electric off on us.
Comments or questions on those 3 items? Okay, we'll move those forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. District equipment bids.
Yeah, so this is another annual item for district bid items. So in prior years that we had these all listed as individual items, we consolidated this year into one attachment and one motion, which I think cleans up the agenda a little bit. So each year what we do is based on district budgets, individual building and department budgets, we put out a general supply bid to make sure all of our departments get the supplies that they need for next year in line with our budgets. Our business office goes through a rigorous process with all of our key individuals in buildings and departments to make sure all of their supplies are met, and we achieve low pricing through receiving bids from multiple vendors. I will tell you that this is getting more challenging. There are less vendors that are interested in going through all of this work to supply bids. Supply chains and increasing prices, I think, have vendors a little less interested in locking in pricing for an entire year when there's so much uncertainty out there. So we feel like we did okay this year. I think Ms. Baldessano and I have already started to talk about if there's other ways we can achieve this next year and still achieve the pricing that we achieve through this annual process. So we're very comfortable recommending the pricing and the bids that are before you tonight, and I'll certainly answer any questions. I won't walk through them all individually, but that's our process for annual bids.
And I appreciate the consolidation of, something like 10 items into one. We already had 24 items on tonight's agenda. Comments or questions on the bids as they are? Itya.
Just a quick one, the transportation school bus fleet section. I see their diesel, that's clearly not your regular fuel for your buses. What is that?
Which specific item are you looking at, Ms. Sharpier? Yeah, right. So these are the names of the companies. So all of the items that were approved are underneath this in a whole nother level. These are the awards to each of the companies that submitted bids.
But this is not buying Diesel fuel, right?
That's
No,
correct.
this is just
not
the
buying
name of
diesel
a, no,
fuel.
okay.
That is
Just wanted
correct.
to check that.
All right, and in terms of the process for the future, are you just, when you say changing it up, does that mean go to, every 6 months or something? Or what is it, what might that mean?
But we're not sure yet. I think one of the things we've kicked around a little bit is having preferred vendor lists to purchase from. So you have vendors that provide pricing on state contracts like CoStarz and PEPM. They're not always the best as far as pricing, but we will evaluate, I think, the pricing we receive this year to state contracts to see if state contracts, and rather than annual bid at the beginning of the year, buy as needed throughout the year, but still in line with what everyone needs. So we wouldn't buy everything up front in the year. We would buy it as needed throughout the year. So we're going to evaluate how our pricing came in against some state contracts and preferred vendors.
I think Mr. Leckman is downplaying how much work this is for the business office and also for our staff as they put together the bid list. As Mr. Leckman just said, buying things when we need them rather than buying everything at the beginning of the year, I think will be to our advantage, because I think back to when I was in the classroom and when I would have to project what I needed for an entire year. When I was a principal and we were able to do just-in-time ordering, we wound up saving a lot of money because we didn't order things unless we really needed them.
All right, are we prepared to move the bids forward to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, and then we just have the food service disposables.
Yes, this is the last one. It's a similar item, but just because this isn't purchased with general fund dollars, it's a separate item. So this is our food service department disposable bids, not the same as the grocery bid that the board approved a few months ago. So Kristen Mistelli had 5 bidders. All items were evaluated. The way this one works, she took the lowest 2 bidders for all items. They were evaluated, and low bids for each item then from the lowest 2 total bidders were selected. And those are the 2 attachments that are with this agenda item. So the award will be to both vendors based on those itemized lists. Kristen did note that this is another item that she's seeing significant expense increases, and the disposable costs are up about 43% as compared to her costs last year. So another area we'll continue to monitor.
Comments or questions? Maybe a question for Kristen at a future meeting, but is there an opportunity to pursue using fewer disposables, generating less trash in the process? I assume she's thinking about that all the time anyway.
She is thinking about that all the time. Certainly, I think that's something when we discuss her budget at a future meeting, we can certainly have that conversation in more detail.
All right, anybody else? All right, we'll move that forward.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and yes, so that is our 24 agenda items. We are up to public participation. Anyone would like to speak? Yes, okay.
Anita Prester, Fort Washington. I would never sit through 24 agenda items and then not speak. So let me start with things that were closer to the end of the meeting. You know, I'm obsessive about taking notes, but I use my good old-fashioned Palmer method that I learned in Catholic school, so it's not like I get every word. But I thought I counted 6 people who were interested in what we'll call the alternate tax hike of 2%. And I think that was Darlene, and thank you, Darlene, for leading off that discussion. And then Jeff, and then Michael, then Art, and I thought Jenna said she was definitely comfortable. And TT said she started at 2.3%, but she thought she'd be okay at 2% because Dr. Yanni or the administration was recommending it. So I counted 6. You can change your mind like 5 minutes from now or next week. But Mark, you and I'm just going to point it out because you and I interpreted that really differently. You didn't count a majority of the board and I did. Anyway, I appreciate that discussion that was had about it, and as a taxpayer who had some tornado damage, and I don't like to complain about it. I'm not going to complain because so many of my neighbors have it so much worse, including somebody right next door to me. has it so much worse. But it's like the gift that keeps on giving. And I have a good insurance company, and I'm not complaining at all about them, but there are things that aren't covered. And I'm fortunate that we can afford our out-of-pocket cost. I have no idea how a young couple could afford the out-of-pocket cost, or a couple who's maybe a little bit older than us and on a fixed income. I don't know how they can afford it. So it may not be a big difference between 2% and 2.3%, but I think a lot of taxpayers will appreciate it, and I appreciate that you had a discussion about it. I have, I think, 2 or maybe more questions, just minor, but for you, Andy, because I like to make sure I really understand things before I formulate my very strong opinions. So you said you have a concern that the state budget's not finalized, which I think is kind of pretty normal for the state. But I understand as the business manager, you want to know what amount of money we're getting, but I just wanted to clarify, we never can get less. Isn't that correct? Isn't everyone falls into the hold harmless provision? So Upper Dublin or any other district never gets less from the state than the previous year. Just after I'm done, you can verify if that's correct or not. And then just another thing I'm curious about. At these meetings, understandably, there's a lot of focus on the amount of money or amount of revenue coming from new developments and new construction. And I totally get why a business manager would not want to put that into the budget. You can't really put that into the budget for future years, but you could you could sort of do a provisional estimate and, just say it's a guesstimate, it's provisional, do not lock me into this. Because I just think it would be helpful for long-term planning. Or when I say long-term, maybe you would just go a year ahead. I just think it might be helpful for people to understand what kind of money or revenue you would expect from these developments. Okay, I have some questions about the support staff contract. I don't know if I should be saving them till next week, which I may just repeat them if you can't answer tonight. But there's already discussion on Facebook. I don't like Facebook to be my source of information because, again, I have opinions on things, but I like them to be based on facts. So the thing is that there have been a couple articles around Ambler and a couple other things that the district has made a statement and put out what the percent increases are. So I have that information. At first glance, they seem high to me, but then well, I have a specific question, and this is from a Facebook post. Quote, Upper Dublin School District is one of the lowest paid support staff groups in the area. An educational assistant is just over $10 less an hour than Wissahickon pays for the same position. So I guess I want to know, and we're talking specifically about educational assistants because I understand there's other people in the support staff group. That does not seem possible to me. And I'm going to admit that I don't follow support staff contracts as closely as I have followed the teacher staff contracts. But to have such a big difference, if that's correct, for an educational assistant here in Upper Dublin to be making a difference of $10 per hour from Wissahickon seems unusual. I don't actually think it could be correct, but I'm curious about it because every time a contract is done, whether it's support staff or whether it's the teachers, I think I could say this safely, that every single board, no matter whether they were conservative or whether they were very fiscally liberal, every single board has always aimed to try to make our contracts competitive with other districts in Montgomery County. So I'm just a little bit surprised if that could even be possibly true. And if it's not true, I would just like to know that.
Anita, just
timing?
Yeah. We're not
I'm
going to
already
be
at
too
4 minutes.
strict about it. We're probably way over it, but
Okay.
just to remind you to,
All right, so I'm done then. So I'll
if you have something else, you can go on. I just wanted to, okay. And seeing nobody else come to the mic, we did have one comment submitted through the form. I will read that, and then we'll get to responses if there are any. This one is from Jenny Vitella, Ambler. Three bullet points. Why geothermal at Fort Washington? Didn't we have some trouble with the units on the roof at the high school and had to replace half of them after the only 1-year warranty? Isn't the geothermal system part of the reason we have a gravel lot and no bus depot at UDHS? Did we as a district do the proper cost-benefit study on the high school system to prove to taxpayers that this is a good investment? Number two, 2.3% tax increase generates tax revenue of $1.9 million, but, quote, debt service for Sandy Run Middle School, $2.12 million increase. This increase was anticipated and planned for and has very little impact from the prior year budget. The district realized a one-time savings of $1.9 million from a bond refunding and budgeted for that in the 21-22 budget with a planned transfer to capital reserve. Why did we transfer $1.9 million last year if it's needed for this year? And number three, if we continue to allow an untold amount of high-density housing in Upper Dublin to help ease taxes on residents, we have $10 million in reserves and maybe more to come after the audit. Why are we not giving our residents and taxpayers some relief in a year when there is inflation, high gas prices, and high food prices? You could simply move less to reserves and reduce the tax increase by 1%. What does 1% yield to the district? It isn't much relatively, and a reduced tax increase will help all Upper Dublin property owners. Live within your means, don't waste, do without, and make do. And that is the end of that comment. With that, I will close public participation and throw it over to Steve.
Regarding the support staff contract, when you compare our educational assistants with those who are employed by Wissahickon, it's not an apples to oranges comparison. There's a different number of days and a different number of hours that people work. So when you look at total compensation, the difference looks bigger than it is. In the support staff contract, there are differentiated raises, and one of the reasons that we looked at differentiated raises was to make sure that we're able to attract and retain really good employees, and one of those groups that we needed to work on were the educational assistants. But I don't believe it's as much as $10 an hour. We can look and bring back a number, but I just want to be clear and careful when we compare districts. And I'm not suggesting that the person that raised the comment tonight is comparing the districts, but because there are a different number of hours in the entire year that they work, doing that apples to apples comparison is really challenging.
I'll also, just on that item, just remind everyone, the contract, the new support staff contract will be up for us to vote on next week. It hasn't been approved yet. There is a tentative agreement for us to vote on Monday, and at that point, I believe, is when the details will surface, but not until then.
I'll just add a couple of items. So the state budget, I don't have the dates or the dollar amounts right in front of me, but while it is unlikely that the district could receive less because there is a hold harmless, when the new funding formula was put into place a couple of years ago, 5-6 years ago, there was a portion of the state budget of the BEF funding that was set, and it said, here's your hold harmless, you can't get any less than that. Since then, all of the new money that has been added into the BEF line item of the state budget runs through a funding formula, and there is potentially the ability that if no new money is added, that some school districts will get more, some school districts will get less, because it's how all of the data points in the calculation for Upper Dublin compare and change to every other of the 500-plus school districts, LEAs across the state. So yes, it's unlikely, but there is potential that a school district could get less than they had last year under the new funding formula. For new developments, I understand the question. I think that's why, as part of many of my budget presentations, especially the revenue budget presentation, there is a slide that just identifies all of the new developments, the revenue received to date, and what the potential future revenue is, so that yes, it's not built into the budget, but we're all aware of what it is, and we don't know how quickly it's going to materialize and become real revenue to the district. So we don't ignore it, but it's not built into the budget or projections. And then Mr. Lester, I don't know if you want to cover the geothermal at the high school and just add that, but this was fully vetted by our professionals, and it's not the same as the high school.
No, it's not as large of a system as the high school field system. We were talking about 60 wells. I wasn't here when the high school started up, but looking back through, some of the problems that we had in the past were block strainers on the system that kept the compressors cool, which more than likely led to some failures. But through water treatment and monitoring, that's been corrected. We also, that's one of the items we do on preventive maintenance now is check the strainers. So I don't expect any issues at Fort Washington. But yes, this was vetted through. We have different systems in our different buildings, and this was determined to be the best system and most efficient system for Fort Washington. We could do heat pumps, but we would need boilers and cooling towers, and nobody wants a cooling tower next to a playground. It's noisy, it's ugly, it's dirty. So geothermal is the best way for Fort Washington. We just didn't have the ability to put ductwork in. So a system like we had at Sandy Run, the new Sandy Run, where you have chillers, air handlers, and, ventilation boxes in the ceilings, that just wasn't possible at Fort Washington without significantly trying to lower the ceiling.
Okay. The only other two things I wanted to respond to, there was a comment about, isn't the geothermal system the reason we have a gravel lot and no bus depot? No. That has really nothing to do with either of those things. And I can, if someone wants to contact me, I can talk more about why. And then there was a comment about if we continue to allow an untold amount of high-density housing in UD to help ease taxes on residents. I just want to be clear for anyone who may be listening, we don't do that. The school board doesn't do that. The school board has no involvement in any of those kinds of decisions. Certainly, having more taxable property in Upper Dublin does help on the revenue side of the budget, and that, certainly makes it, I'll say easier for us to balance the expenditure side, but that has nothing to do with any decisions that we make here. Any other comments or questions on public participation? Art, did you have something?
I have a closing comment.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Leckman and Ms. Balisano for the budget process and the complete transparency of it, and the 28-page document that I read every night before I go to bed. If I'm unable to go to sleep, I start reading this.
And I know he reads it every night because I get a random text, there's a missing comma on page 16.
No, but this is an incredible document. If you really want to know how our budget process works, we don't talk about this document enough. It really does include everything, including the tax increases since 2001. It shows our tax increases until this year. So it's a great resource. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, with that, I will announce our next Finance Committee meeting will be Wednesday, August 17th, no meeting in July. Wednesday, August 17th at 6 p.m., and we are adjourned.